Hello everybody, it's your favorite West Virginia Space here, and D&D 5e has had a lot of fan-made setting books. Now this isn't surprising because D&D 5e has not had a whole lot of official setting books given to it, and due to how easy it is to make your own, legally at least, your own setting for D&D 5e, both before and after the scandal, it can be a very easy and lucrative way to do in the RPG business. However, with so many out there, that does lead to a question: what is their purpose? Now this is going to sound weird because most people when they will discuss how to tell the cream from the not cream, or other things like that, but I'm going to talk about when is it actually useful to buy a setting book, when is it necessary, and when is it not actually worth the price. So this is actually a bit more complex topic than I think people give it credit for, so I want to be the first person to talk about it since I believe this will become a growing issue over time. Let's begin. Now, I think it's worth stressing as an immediate point is that you don't generally need any kind of setting book to play in most settings you'd want to do in D&D. Now, this is going to sound weird, but it is a very true statement of fact that you don't necessarily need an official book to do these kind of things. If you want to play a game set in feudal Japan, or at least something based on feudal Japan, you don't need a special samurai class or even a subclass. Just say you are a fighter who is a samurai. Or you don't need a special ninja class or subclass, just say you're a rogue. And this is a pretty classic, I've seen several people attempt to do this, even official D&D do it on occasion. So this is like a perfect example how just reskinning, it's not even really reskinning because they're really all the same thing, or at least close enough by D&D rule standards, is that this is alone can do it. A little bit of flavoring is all you need. Now, it is a bit trickier with races in D&D due to the fact how some of them have very particular lores to them, and trying to change things around can make them quite a bit different, but that can either be handled by some kind of handouts or finding clever ways to wove it in. And even if you say you totally need a new race, for D&D, you could just either reskin one that already exists, or just make up a new one. I know that sounds like a huge thing, like, we're gonna make a whole new race? That's a lot to ask. But literally just the night before I recorded this video, I decided I was gonna make a Kitsune for D&D 5e based on the player's handbook races. This is what I got. I'll have the link in the video below. And as you can see, it's not super, I would say, unique, but it's a perfect example of how I made this in 1 hour. Literally, I had everything wrote down in 1 hour. If I can come up with a literal whole new race that is completely playable in D&D 5e in 1 hour, then it's not really that saying I need to buy a specialized book to give me the stats for this when it's not that hard. Now, admittedly, there is times where I'm going to get into where that is necessary. But even a lot of people say is that, but I want a certain theme for my game. I want sworded sorcery or dark fantasy or this kind of thing or that kind of thing. But, you don't really need that either in most cases. If you want to run a sword and sorcery game, it's how you run it. Run the game like you are the protagonist, like you are Conan on an epic quest. If you want a dark fantasy, make sure the world's dark and gritty and, with that kind of stuff. If you want to do magical Hogwarts-style Harry Potter school, then just have the characters in it. That's pretty easy. I'm not gonna lie on that one. Have them take classes. Now, why you do this is a different question, but it's not that hard. You kind of get what I'm going for. A lot of mechanics can be reskinned or easily come up with. It's not that terribly difficult. So, but here's the thing. I don't think setting books are bad. In fact, I think they're very good. But here's the question. If all that is easy, or at least easy enough for you to do, because as a GM, you are presumably also making a whole original story, when is a setting book a good idea? Well, setting books do have several advantages to them. One is just by having standardized lore that it's very likely that it's much easier when you're making something that you might miss certain areas of lore that can cause massive plot holes or inconsistencies or otherwise break the immersion of your game, even if your players are just doing it for a dungeon crawl. However, official products, or, official as in actually published and all that jazz, they've been play tested in most good cases. They've been thought out, so these massive plot holes aren't likely to exist, or at the very least be much more minimal or unlikely to occur. So you can get a very cohesive world without necessarily having to spend a long time trying to figure out how your world works. Also is because some worlds are legitimately cool and they provide information you wouldn't think of. And stuff like that can be very interesting plot threads. It's also worth mentioning that as a GM or someone who's just creating things on the fly, it's very likely you'll leave out certain bits of information that is hard to draw into, or you might have to make up on the fly that once again down the road can lead to inconsistencies. But if I can just flip open the book of Roshkaland, and it will tell me all the major kingdoms in the world, and I need to know where there's a merchant civilization, oh, it's right here. That is incredibly valuable. Another interesting note is basically when there is unique mechanics. Now, I did mention how it's not that hard to come up with, like, say, a player race, but things like subclasses and especially full classes can be very difficult, as their balancing is a lot more complex, all the features that has to go into them, the unique gimmick. Though it is certainly possible to homebrew this, it can be extremely difficult in certain cases, or at the very least can very easily lead to some kind of alienation, either on the person playing the unique class or the people who are playing with that guy. So generally speaking, if a book has that, is usually done a good job of trying to make sure everything works together naturally. And then there's even more unique mechanics, like rocks that give you mutation, or radioactive gas across the land, or psionic powers that anyone can have, or this or that or whatever. Or, I don't know, you can turn into a magical girl or something, I don't know. I don't know what all those things are out there. But the point is, those can be both relatively easy to come up with in a game sense, but listen, as someone who's made 2 RPGs, one of them with a whole power system, let me tell you, that can get tricky and difficult. And I don't even think my examples were very good. So when I say that, I mean also there is a certain benefit in just knowing somebody else has designed all this, and they probably know what they're doing, at least as much as you do, hopefully more. And all the things come together. And then sometimes some worlds are just very interesting on concession that you want to play. And I think that is also very important. Is that if you want to play in this world, sometimes picking up the book that tells you how to do that is good. A lot of these books come with like pre-made adventures or lore tips or tips for running the game in this setting. And that's not something you can come up with on your own, really. You can't really come up with tips for yourself to give to yourself. Not really, at least. But these guys can. They can tell you when things, avoid certain pitfalls or things to look out for, that kind of thing, that it can only be done if someone else did it first and then play tested it and then made sure it all made sense, or at least close enough. So ultimately, I think those are good reasons when to get a pre-made setting RPG, D&D setting. But ultimately, that's just my opinion. What do you think? I would love to hear your opinions down in the comments. And what's your favorite, fan-made setting for D&D 5e? Either way, I'll see you all next time. Yeah. Hey, why don't you hit that sub button? You're gonna become a subscribble. Get to see my content quicker. Wouldn't that be nice? I bet so.